Welcome to another edition of Interruptions. I'm your host, Otis Smith. Today I have two guests, brilliant men, Paul Nuttall, John Fitzgerald, and we're here to talk about wrongfully people incarcerated and given second chances. They have a documentary out called Second Chance Saved Forgotten Prisoners. And so we're going to talk to them tonight, and they're going to give us information also about what they are working on to try to free and help free Larry Hoover. How you doing? How you guys doing, gentlemen?
Doing outstanding, sir.
I think
Yes, happy Friday.
Yeah. Well, it's Friday, boy. I thank you guys for coming on. I'm glad to sit down with you guys and have this conversation about these topics. I think it's very important, especially for our community. Especially we're incarcerated at a very alarming rate for. I'm just gonna be kind and just say a lot of years before me, way before me, and since I've been living for 51 years, and hopefully it'll slow down and stop. Uh, but my first question for you guys is why you guys feel passionate to help people that are wrongfully incarcerated.
Well, John got his method. I have my method. However, I was wrongly incarcerated before, and I was put in the slammer for 14 months for a crime I didn't commit. However, John been doing this for a long time to individuals and try to get them out of prison. However, a lot of times that don't work because the justice system it's all jacked up and it's messed up. A lot of people don't want to come out to help. But however, now we have a show that we can utilize for television to help individuals get from wrongly conviction or overserve their time. So it's the only show. No one has a show like this that we do have the evidence presented on national TV, and then everybody can quarterback off of it, and then someone has to they got to answer to what they have done, whether if it's corruption or whether it's some things that not knowledgeable for the viewers, or they can think about, okay, look, this man is innocent. Why was you going to kill him? So that's our method of trying to help people around the world because of what happened to me in my life story.
Okay.
Once that happened to me, I was going to do the show on my own, and then John came along because he had an individual named David Dew that he's been working on for years, trying to get him from under the incarceration, try to get him out the pig pen, as they say, because the justice system did him wrong. So John came on board with us, and then I remember sitting down there with Floyd Senior, and he said, "Hey man, like I think you should get somebody like John or someone like that to be the host of the show because they looking at you with the dreads. You're a black guy. It's not gonna kind of follow up what everybody's trying to do now.
Okay.
All these other things, but now we have John Fitzgerald, who's a former agent, a special agent. We have some more people on board, and then now they're gonna listen because it ain't me. I mean, it's John's show. However, we the founder, the CEO, so we have to change that concept to make it a better show.
Gotcha.
So that's getting people out.
What is it for you, John?
Well, I'll tell you, it's a multi-tiered blessing for me. Paul and I came into contact. Paul Tiffany and I came into contact almost a year ago, almost exactly a year ago.
Okay.
And we came into contact because they were generous enough to feature one of my clients, David Dew, as an episode in this emerging show. And in sharing the details of David's incarceration these many years with Paul and Tiffany, whether it be God or Providence, what do you want to call it, I think we all kind of agree that we could actually work cohesively and effectively together, and that they would be bringing their life experiences and their contacts. I'd be bringing mine and my criminal justice circle. And it seemed like a perfect blending of resources. And it not only has proven to be that, it's also demonstrated who's not supposed to go forward with us, because along the way during this past year, Paul and Tiffany will attest to the fact that we've met many people who were well-intentioned and they wanted to get involved, but they wanted to get involved to the extent that it was fun for them. There's a tremendous amount of hard work, a tremendous amount of research, there's sacrifice. There is a danger element. Why? Because when you're discussing issues of police misconduct or criminal justice failures, judicial misconduct on the part of the judges, maybe even prosecutorial misconduct, because prosecutors withheld exculpatory evidence, which is a fancy word for evidence that demonstrates innocence, you're not going to develop a big fan base in that circle. You'll develop many admirers in the civilian world, but we are going to be stepping on toes in a way that is meant to secure the next generation. So, for example, one of the conceits of the show that I think is ingenious is that at the end of every episode where we've been detailing the story of a particular prisoner, we're going to do a 5 to 8 minute, what we call case text, where based on the episode, I'll be offering guidance to the audience about how they can avoid similar pitfalls. And then from there, we want to start reaching out to the community. We want to impact the next generation by doing classes, law classes for 8th graders, 9th graders, because oftentimes when minority kids get into trouble, they made a stupid decision. And that stupid decision was born of a whole host of influences, from the bravado of the culture, bad parental influencing, a really deficit-laden public school system. And then we make choices. And so they panic, they do and say stupid things, they get themselves caught up in the criminal justice system. And notice it's called a system. Years ago when I was being trained, I had a law professor tell me that really criminal justice is a conveyor belt. The first entry onto a conveyor belt is your first interaction with law enforcement.
Wow.
Then you're conveyed further along, and then you stop in front of the judge. And depending on how that goes, you continue down that conveyance to the correctional system. So once you get impacted by the system, it is very, very difficult to extricate, to remove yourself in a way that gives you total freedom and doesn't injure your reputation, your ability to get a job and move forward as a productive member of society. And so if we can start reaching out to freshmen all around the nation, in the urban cities of America, where crime is not only flourishing, the crime in the urban cities are serving as role models for crime syndicates around the world, unfortunately. And so we want to do simple things that you and I may take for granted, but people really don't understand. So, for example, I tell students, listen, do me a favor. When you come into contact with law enforcement, don't say that you know your rights. Because first of all, you don't know squat. Here in California, if you don't know the California Penal Code, if you don't know the Vehicle Code, if you don't know the Health and Welfare Code, if you don't know the Education Code, if you don't know California Post, that's POST, that's the acronym for Peace Officer Standards and Training. That is the curriculum by which all officers are trained in California. If you don't know that, you don't know squat. So, for example, only an untrained person says, I know my rights. A trained person says, Officer, I am operating within my constitutional safeguards. The term constitutional safeguard is the language of the Supreme Court. It's the language of the appellate court. So you were discussing earlier the difficulty of dealing with the criminal justice system where people need advocacy, but either can't afford it or don't know how to participate. Well, one of the things that we need to teach people to do is to know how to speak the language of that system. So one way to literally paralyze a poorly trained officer, and I don't chalk it up to all corruption. I chalk it up to people who are inherently corrupt. Yes, okay, that's a given. But most of the officers who come into contact are simply poorly trained. That's the problem. And so one of the ways to paralyze a poorly trained officer when coming into contact with them is to say one of 3 things here in California. Officer, first and foremost, I want to thank you for your service to the city of Los Angeles. Officer, your rudeness to me, your condescending attitude towards me. Well, officer, I'm sure you appreciate that you are in violation of case law, California Post, and your own policy manual. Officer, I'm sure you appreciate that your rudeness to me is a violation of your own mission statement of values. And technically, should I choose to, I could execute an adverse personnel action against you tomorrow. With that, let us both back up, let us say goodbye to each other, and let us wish each other the best of days. And then boom, you leave. See, when you mention case law, when you mention California Post, and you mention their Bible, the Bible for every officer, is actually their policy manual. So when you mention those 3 things, you are welling up in them a curiosity about who the heck is this person? Is this the son of a commander? Is he a cop? You know what I mean? And I know it's easy for me to articulate this in a very fluid
Right.
manner, and
Yes.
I've had students say that to me. Well, John, that's great for you, but what about me? Okay, I'm not as articulate as you. Well, you don't have to be. That's where the training comes in. What we're going to share on the show is nothing that people cannot acquire in time. So, for example, get to know your agency policy manual. All policy manuals online. You don't have to read all 880 pages.
Okay.
Okay, the policy manuals throughout America are fairly uniform. You know why? They're all based on the United States Constitution. Okay, every policy manual has a chief's preface. That's the chief remarks to the agency and to the general public that we're going to do the best to serve you. Every policy manual has a mission statement of values. If you memorize nothing else than mission statement of values and you use that articulation when dealing with an officer who's being rude or condescending, that'll be enough to cause that person to backtrack a bit and want to bring this contact to a close, because they now know that you are positioned to leverage them. And what I encourage people to do is to, you know what, have fun with it. You're walking and exercising your constitutional safeguards. You have a right to go where you want, to say what you want, to do what
Right.
you want. Listen, if you are not the subject of a warrant or an officer did not see you commit a crime, there is no reason for law enforcement to ever come into contact with you. So the problem is that poorly trained minority youth talk themselves into an arrest. They do, because we were trained to pursue what is called consent contact. Consent contact is when I walk up to you, sir, can we talk for a moment? And you consent to talk to me by simply acknowledging me. Boom, I'm going to get you to talk yourself into an arrest. But the problem is, it's how do you not give consent for contact? Poorly trained kids are going to say, F you, or they're going to run off, right?
Right.
A trained ninth grader is going to say, officer, again, thank you for your service, but in keeping with California Post settled case law and the LAPD policy manual, I'm going to give you limited consent to contact me. Officer, do you need my help with anything? Oh, you don't? Okay, thank you, sir. At this time, I'm going to go withdraw my limited consent for contact. I want to wish you the best, and then boom, you walk on your way. That's that's just an inkling of the type of instruction we want to provide for our audience.
That's knowledge and wisdom. And knowledge is the information, and then you're giving us wisdom of how to apply the knowledge. So a lot of people don't realize you can have knowledge, but if you don't have wisdom, the mature application of the knowledge, then you just gave us both, right? And
Yeah.
so
I'll tell you.
Go
Well, I
ahead.
was going to say, not to interrupt you. So I personally, I am not a fan of the First Amendment auditors on YouTube, because their irascibility, their yelling and acting a fool is diminishing the point that they're trying to make.
Correct.
And one of the keys to walking the authority of your constitutional safeguard is to never let them see you sweat. You be relaxed, calm voice, calm tone, and don't give anyone any leverage over you. So I suggest to people that they ask the officer, thank you for your contact with me today. Can you assure me that your body camera is activated this time, just in the event that my legal team needs to access it later? So just encouraging officers to put their body, and for most agencies, once a call is coming to the vehicle, that body camera is activated automatically. Because there was a time when officers had the luxury of activating it as they chose, but now in an effort to increase the integrity regarding the contacts or the stops, those cameras are activated automatically. But see, that's not really the point. The point is you want to impress upon the officer that you are conscious about the fact that you want this interaction audio and videotaped.
See, that's, I always tell people you have to know when to fight, and then you have to know how to fight. See, sometimes, like you said, we get in a fight, but don't know how to fight, and we still trying to figure out why we keep losing the fight. Because it's the old adage, you keep bringing a knife to a gunfight, and it's like you said, we don't know the lingo. And when you well, I'm gonna tell you, I was smiling when you first was giving us the lingo, because it took me back to the movie Law Abiding Citizen, where when the guy gave her just some legal jargon, and she was going to let him go. And he said, see, that's what's wrong with the system. Because he's saying, I'm guilty, but because I gave you some legal, he knew how to speak the language to get what he wanted. So that's why I was impressed with what you said. Let me ask you this, and I'm glad that you're on here, seriously, because this question here, you got to bring it home. Both of you guys got to bring it home for me, which is, does the law play for the truth or just to win the case?
Okay. Paul, you go first.
Hey man, I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna keep pushing these buttons on this one. It goes for to win the case. I mean, a lot of these corrupt politicians, a lot of these corrupt police officers, a lot of these corrupt judges, even your attorney can be all in the mix of things, and they're not speaking the truth. They want to get justice only for just to get a felony. It's all a lie. Now, it ain't gonna be a lie if you got like 4 or 5 felonies, right? So
Right.
then they put them on you and say, well, this is what he did before. And people will believe it because you did it before. But that don't mean you did it again. You know,
Right.
however, they like to lie. They like to stack these prisons up. They like to get money off people. And it's sad, it's our people, black minority people, Hispanic race, and it's a lot of things that the justice system has at the same case these other people have. For instance, let me rewind what
Hmm.
happened in Dallas when this lady came in and she shot and killed a black man, a Dallas police officer, mind you, right? She
Okay.
got manslaughter. That was a black guy went in somebody's apartment, he got life in prison, right? Or the
Hmm.
death in Texas, right? So and then one officer in Ohio pulled a gun out on the black guy, came out and raised his hands, and she shot him. Her sergeant turned, pulled a gun on her and took her gun. Manslaughter. That should have been first degree murder, right? So if you look at all these things that's going on around our community and our black majority people or Hispanics, whatever it may be, different racial, they're not telling the truth. They are telling a lie because they have to tell a lie. The lawyer tells you a lie. He told me one day, oh, you know, man, if you take it to court, you're gonna get all this time. But they don't know. They go by your guidelines. You know, I'm afraid now. They might put me 50, 60 years. You know, so I take that plea. They just want that felony. Now you hit. Now they're gonna triple and double it up. Like for instance, when they took me, hey Paul, we're gonna drop the charges. We're gonna charge you with one because we think you did have something to do with it. They did it because you know they saw I was a flight risk and they wouldn't let me out because I'm a black man. I'm gonna run. That's what they think. Then, however, then right after that, they knew child support was coming after me. Said you can't pay your child support. They told me they come first, but now they let you pay child support. But back then, 2008, 9, you didn't pay child support. You had to pay the federal first. So when I paid the federal, after they let me off a supervisor release 3 years, I'm clean. State trooper, I'm driving. State trooper picks me up. Oh, you got another felony in Michigan. It's over 30,000. 10,000 is what? But they say I had to pay them first. Oh well, that's your problem.
Yeah.
Expedite me to Michigan. 2 felonies, Jack. I'm telling you that's how they do it. They already know this. It's a domino effect. They play cards with you. You see, but when you have some people like John and everybody else who can play the cards with you, oh now you got some new dealers, brother. Oh now we're gonna do something about it. But to answer your question, yes, they lying. It's just a lie. So that's what I would say.
The reason I asked that question before you go, John, excuse me, is because when you mentioned it earlier, and because you segue beautifully into my question, which suppression of evidence. It's like if you're really trying to get to the truth of the matter, why are you suppressing evidence? Is it because you want to lock me up so
Right.
you can because if you're trying to get to the heart of the truth of the matter, you're going to say, okay, this guy is innocent because we got this evidence that shows XYZ. Let's look for the real perpetrators. Whereas no, we got him on the hook, we got him on the string, we're going in for the kill. So that's why I asked that question: is are they playing for the truth or are they playing to win?
Playing to win.
Well, Otis, yeah.
Checkmate.
I'll tell you, Otis, your question would actually serve as an outstanding curriculum for a season-long or a semester-long class. There's just so much to discuss in that question, and Paul did an outstanding job of kind of establishing a base with which for me to platform. And so I think the best way to answer that is to make a few general remarks, and I'll go into some
Sure.
particularities. The system as a whole, the checks and balances are in place to work to favor justice. That's why Lady Justice has a blindfold. We break down when we rely on the human element. That's the problem. Individuals are making moral choices to do the right thing or to do the wrong thing. That's what it comes down to. So, for example, let's talk about the first introduction into the criminal justice system, law enforcement. You are not a dirty cop because you became a cop. You are a dirty person who in time became a cop. So if you were serving as a trainer at Gold's Gym or you were a manager at a grocery store, you were inclined to be a dishonest, immoral person, and then becoming a cop was just next in line for you. The fallacy of the law enforcement background is that the background, every dirty cop passed a background. Every dirty cop passed a polygraph exam.
Right.
Okay. The screening process for law enforcement is dedicated to observing demonstrative behavior, what people saw you do, what they heard you say. You see what I mean? There's nothing about the screening process that weighs and measures the character of a man's heart. And I tell this to cops that I train, you are not a dirty cop because of what you do in the presence of others. Your dirtiness and your immorality is done in privacy, quite honestly. So that's a very, very difficult thing to address. Let's move on to prosecutors. How do prosecutors contribute to the brokenness that characterizes the current criminal justice system, at least as it applies to the minority community?
All right.
The vast majority of federal prosecutors have no interest in being cops, so to speak. Literally everyone in Congress right now is a former federal prosecutor. They have political aspirations. And so oftentimes in pursuit of a political aspiration where 10 years down the line when they're running for senator or attorney general, they want to say, well, when I was a prosecutor, I had a 100% conviction rate. They will knowingly take cases, either overcharge people in terms of the crime at hand, or they will sometimes withhold exculpatory information in an effort to attain that conviction. And I shared this on the last show, and this hadn't dawned on me. This is not an original idea. This is something I read in former prosecutor Sidney Powell's book that she wrote years ago, an amazing federal prosecutor. She said that the most powerful person in the federal government is the federal prosecutor. It's not the president. It's not even members of the Supreme Court, although they walk in their own authority. It's the federal prosecutor. That's the most powerful person for two reasons. Number one, they know that they possess a level of knowledge that by far exceeds most people. Number two, they know that all the judges listen to them. Number three, they know that all the law enforcement agencies listen to them. And number four, they know that there is zero accountability. So a number of judges have done the right thing and they've reversed the convictions and then scolded those prosecutors for withholding exculpatory information. And that led to nothing more than a little embarrassment in court, maybe something entered onto a transcript, but there was no accountability on the part of the prosecuting attorney. Now, if you really want to make an issue, you have to always know how to leverage people.
Okay.
So in an effort to leverage attorneys in California, either because they're crooked or they're incompetent or whatever, I keep myself abreast of the California bar exams rules of professional conduct. Those are the rules, the 50 or 60 rules that shape and inform how an attorney in California does his or her job. Every state has their own rules of professional conduct.
Right.
And so by keeping abreast of those rules, when an attorney exceeds the parameter of his or her authority, then it is almost incumbent upon me to remind them that their conduct could rise to the level of exceeding the rules of professional conduct, which would compel that I have to file a complaint against them with the Bar Association. See, just as I would do that with an officer, referencing the officer's policy manual, you can do that with attorneys, including federal prosecutors. People don't know that if you find out where the federal prosecutor is barred, when I say barred, meaning a member of the bar for that state,
right,
you can file a complaint against that prosecutor. Now, unfortunately, as it stands now, you cannot sue a federal prosecutor. They are immunized, so to speak, but we're hoping that the show will garner enough political support from people around the nation where they will support us in our efforts to go to Congress to legislate a higher degree of accountability on the part of federal prosecutors. Once federal prosecutors now know that they can be held accountable for prosecutorial misconduct, you're going to find that the conviction rate is going to change.
So then that
Now,
means, I just want to make a comment and see what you think. That means then justice is not balanced.
no, the problem with the imbalance now is that the leverage is weighed on in favor of those who work in the criminal justice system.
Correct.
Your everyday citizen is completely unarmed with the knowledge they need just to live their life on a day-to-day basis. Now, believe me, everything I've shared with you thus far,
Right.
no one is going to have to go to law school to learn this stuff. This is stuff that should be taught in every ninth grade civics class. All we're doing is exposing people to an area of knowledge that they can very easily acquire and utilize on their own. So, it's sad that in cities across America for years now, minority communities have had to have that talk, with their son about
Right.
how you react when you come to contact with law enforcement. I appreciate that, but I find two faults with that. Number one, don't instill automatic fear in your child. That's the bottom line. Teach your kid to be respectful to his teacher, to his neighbor, to his friend, to his auntie, and to the cop. Just be respectful. Just be a decent human being. So that's fault number one. Number two, the problem is that the discussion that parents are having now with kids is insufficient. It's not sufficient to simply pull over, turn off the engine, roll down the window, turn on the interior light, bring down all the windows, put your hands on the steering wheel. That's insufficient. What you're doing when you do that, and yes, that's in the interest of officer safety. You are demonstrating to the officer that, yes, you're trying to consider their officer safety, but you're also putting yourself in a second class position. Whether or
Correct.
not I get a ticket, whether or not I go to jail should not be dependent upon whether or not I roll down the window, put on the interior lights, and put my hands on the wheel. Your conduct with the officer should be such that that officer knows within 5 seconds of you opening your mouth that you're an upstanding citizen. That's the bottom line. And that's not that talk that the parents are having now. For those reasons, I believe is insufficient. So we want to have those parents continue those talks. We just hope to come in and supplement those talks, if only just to really even work with the parents directly and let the parents train up their kids.
Now that's that. Like, once again, you showing us how to fight. Once again, you may know that you're in a fight, but once again, if you don't know how to fight, like if you're a street guy going up against a boxer, you about to get
Yeah.
knocked out, or an MMA fighter, you about to get, like you said, disarmed real quickly.
Mhm.
So you're giving us, and let me ask you this. I told this side question, and this is no, for both of you, especially what you went through, Paul. But I find it, well, I want to say oxymoron, but I won't use that. But it's crazy to me. It's idiotic thinking to me to say ignorance of the law is no excuse. That doesn't compute to my brain. Here's why, John. You never sent me an email telling me the law changed. You never sent me an email
Mhm.
to say what the law was in the beginning. I don't do this for a living. So how you gonna sit here and tell me ignorance of the law is no excuse because you don't know what you don't know? So if I take a
Yeah.
Supreme Court judge or I take a federal prosecutor and put you on the football field, and if they call a play, I guarantee you don't know the play. You don't know what to do out there, so you about to get, as Ice Cube would say, knock the hell out. Why? Because you don't know. So once again, unbalanced. I just think that's very. I'm talking about for America. Everywhere you go, ignorance of the law is no excuse when I don't do this for a living. And even if some lawyers, as you know, John, do this for a living, they still have to go read and see what the law says. Did it change? You have CPA tax attorneys say what? Hey man, the tax laws change what? Every year. So if the tax laws are changing every year and someone that does this for a living has to keep abreast of what, the law is changing, how you going to tell a civilian who does not do this for a living that ignorance of the law is no excuse when the public, you're not emailing the public saying, okay, what you were talking about, that we could familiarize ourselves with the code and conduct, right? Well,
Mhm.
no one is telling us, okay, go, this is where you find all the laws and this particular, like I just used where you are in California. Okay, murder one, murder two, manslaughter, involuntary, voluntary. People don't know what that means, so
Yeah.
it's only until you in trouble Now you start finding out what all this means. So to that, you guys say what?
I say this. I say that it don't matter. Like if I mean, it matters for us, but for them, it don't matter to them, because the thing about it is you haven't took criminal justice or anything like that. Even though you take it, it's some things they teach you that they don't want you to know. So if you go, like you said, if I bring somebody in and say, hey man, I want you to hit this bag and do a left right hook, they ain't gonna know how to do it if I don't teach them. If I go say, hey man, I want you to kickbox, I want you to do a roundhouse, they ain't gonna know how to do it proper way unless they taught. So everybody from basketball and everybody from football, they taught. They not gonna say, hey, Mike Irvin, I want you to go when Terrell Eggman was there, go do this route. He ain't gonna just do it. He got to do from the plays, because that's what the quarterback calls. So what John is doing and what our team is gonna do on this television show, we're gonna teach like they're gonna go into practice. They're gonna say, I got a case like this, I know what to do next time. And that's gonna like take everything off the table for them. Like John said, yeah, we can't get in trouble by telling the law. However, we might get some spark of them saying, because we got too many big time people on board, I doubt if it ever happened. However, they still gonna just try to do some things. But I just think that, the justice system, man, it's a win-win situation if they got you. If you plead, take it to trial, give more time. And it's just what it is. And they scared of people because, again, they don't know the law. They don't know what the attorneys know. And sometimes attorneys, they say, hey, just give me this case, I'll take care of it. I didn't see a lot of people do it on this, but like I said, we in a lose-lose situation unless you know the law, unless you know the degree of it and what it stands for, and how the people or in the system and trying to what they do is they try to they're pushing the law on you, and you don't even know the law. These are the people who supposed to protect our country, swore in, protect and serve. Oh, they protecting and serving, all right. They're giving you a gourmet plate to the prosecutors, and all they doing is eating it and just putting us in jail because we don't know. Like John stated, if you go out there and say, I know my rights, they'll say, oh, he don't know that. Let's get it. So turn the camera off or the vest or whatever it may be. We don't know if some of them do turn it off, but we don't know. However, it's something inside there that make them either gonna turn it off, or they figure if they got you and they really want you, they're gonna get you.
Or like John said, agitate you until you fall to the place where now they are, what would you call it, John? I guess have the right to, based on how you're behaving.
You're giving them probable cause.
Probable cause. That's it.
Yeah. I'm gonna give you a clear example of the way things work here in LA. So the LAPD policy manual is online for everyone to read, to exercise under. Policy, don't quote me on the policy number. I'm going to say it's 312. It might be 320. I'm going to say 312. Policy 312 is the alternative to arrest. What that means is that when a person comes into contact with law enforcement in LA, if they're not the subject of a warrant, or they're not the subject of a domestic violence violation, and the crime is a misdemeanor, the officers are supposed to write your summons, have you sign it, and promise to appear on that particular court date, and let you go. Okay, that's not happening. What is happening is that the officers who know the policy regarding, it's actually called alternative to arrest, and it's based on the California Penal Code. Officers will put the cuffs on you, put you in the vehicle, transport you, process you, meaning fingerprint you, photograph you, put you in holding, and then 8 hours later, give you a summons to appear. Now you go to the arraignment and the judge has dismissed the case because it was just a misdemeanor. So great, you got your case dismissed, but now you got a criminal record. You got a fingerprint and you got a photograph in the system. So one of the things we teach is, hey guys, all things considered, I want you to memorize this policy from LAPD. Okay, and every police agency in California has the same policy because it's based on the state and it's based on the Constitution. So you should not be passive in the exercise of your rights. Do not let the exercise of your rights depend on what extent the officer wants to recognize your rights. So if you know it's clearly a misdemeanor, officer, I want to thank you for your service to the city of Los Angeles. I apologize that I committed this misdemeanor. If you check your record, you'll see that I'm not the subject of a warrant, and this is not a domestic violence issue. So I want to thank you in keeping with your policy 312 regarding alternative to arrest. I want to thank you for simply writing me my summons, and we'll both be on our way. You have to exercise your rights that way. But people don't know that. And so they end up going to jail for 8 hours. And again, once the case is dismissed, they still got a booking photo and
Booking
fingerprint.
photo, fingerprint, and loss of time.
Yeah.
Because time you can't get back.
Loss of reputation. You know, here in California, the law enforcement communities are allowed to put information up on the net the next day regarding who's been arrested. So you're being publicized to the general public in LA.
Yeah.
You know, long before your case has been adjudicated. Well, where is the presumption of innocence?
Well, no, here's the crazy part of what you said, which I know is true because it happens in Georgia. Excuse me. So you get arrested. That mugshot is on the internet. Mm-hmm. Now, even though, like you said, the case is dismissed, people don't understand when you get a background check. Sometimes they're not running a background check to say, well, Paul or Otis or John, the case was dismissed. It was nothing. They see that mugshot, bam. Yeah, we're not hiring him. It was, you know what I'm, like you said. So loss of reputation. So you are correct on that. You guys. Oh,
and
I'm
Otis,
sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, sir. I just want to add.
Go ahead. No.
Listen, let it be a given. For us, it's a given that there are good cops. There are good prosecutors, there are good judges, okay? There are people within the system working behind the scenes who try to impact people's lives. Let that be a given. But see, the problem is that the conditions we're wrestling with are not the result of the good people working to help others. It's the result of enough poorly trained people that have created this burden that we have to wrestle with. So I don't want anyone to think that we're anti-law enforcement, anything like that. Not at all. You know, we're bringing in, not even bringing in, we have an amazing team of prosecutors, investigators, former FBI agents who are behind the scenes supporting us on this. And so we actually want to contribute to the criminal justice system because, you know what? A well-trained citizen actually will improve the life of an officer. Why? Sometimes officers need to be checked. And there are officers who have acknowledged, you know what, sir, all things considered, you taught me something. And so it's a two-way street. It's a two-way relationship. We're actually impacting everybody. Okay. One of the things I hope to do, well, we as a team hope to do, we want to start running communication classes for officers. You know, if you look at the California Post curriculum here in California, there's 40 or 50 learning domains, which constitutes their 6-month academy. Right? And they cover everything from domestic violence to homicide investigations, to rape investigations, vehicle patrol, SWAT entry. They cover everything. There is not a single domain on effective communication. Part of the problem is that these young officers don't know how to communicate. And so you can walk up to the vehicle and do your job, sir, license or registration, or you can walk up, sir, how are you today? My name is Officer John with the Los Angeles Police Department. You're probably wondering why I stopped you. If you see that stop sign behind there, it looks like you inadvertently rolled through it, all things considered. I just need to check the validity of your license and your registration. If I can give you a warning, I'm gonna favor doing that. That's two different approaches right there. When an officer initiates contact from the perspective of diplomacy, he brings down the anxiety in the citizen tremendously. And if you bring down the anxiety in the citizen, I promise you that's going to be a fruitful contact. But they don't know how to speak that way.
It's funny you say that because I had that happen to me where I made a U-turn, and the officer said, "Do you know why I stopped?" And me and my wife were perplexed. It was like, "No, I don't know." He said, "You made a U-turn. That's a sign right there, prohibited U-turn." Now look, I said, "You know what? I didn't even see the sign. Sorry, you know." And what I thought was a ticket was a warning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I thought it was a ticket, but it was a warning. When I called in to see how much I needed to pay, she said, it was a warning. And I was like, oh, wow. So like you said, because he was calm, I was calm. I just wanted to know what I did. He pointed it out. I said, oh, I didn't even see it. And he wasn't trying to be, oh, well, you should have saw it. I mean, like you said, he could have still gave me a ticket because I was in the wrong, but probably for him, because I responded back to him kindly, just like he was letting me know kindly. He said, just Now my wife, for some reason, man, she always get a warning. She'll never get a ticket. Just always get a warning. And notice I said she was in the car with me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Hey, women know that. Women always try like they smooth their way out.
but they look at us, boy.
It's a wrap.
Excuse me.
Well, I'll tell you, if we're training officers and we leave them with the understanding that every contact that they have with a citizen that results in an amicable parting,
Right.
that is an incremental contribution to the betterment of that environment. You know what I mean? Because
Right.
you live there, they work there, they might live there too. So every individual contact is that little ornament on that Christmas tree. And so with that, if we can train up the citizenry to know how to more properly exercise their rights when contacting law enforcement and train law enforcement to be more effective communicators, we're going to move the needle ahead positively in a manner that'll be, or maybe at some time, almost immeasurable. You know, at some point in the future, you know, we can share with you our thoughts about things like tactical empathy and verbal judo. So what, you know, I do in my law classes is I take the concepts of tactical empathy, which is typically the methodology for FBI hostage negotiation teams. And so we
Okay.
take the methodology of hostage negotiation and we try to apply it to everyday life.
To diffuse.
So that every person you come into contact with, you are regarding them as a person in crisis, regardless of whether or not you know their background. And so it's never ever about what your intent was, it's how the person is receiving your message. So a very common example. One of the best ways to escalate an argument between a wife or a girlfriend or a spouse is when they're frazzled to say, calm down. Okay. Now, you know what your intention was, and you were saying calm down, but it's not about your intention, it's how they're receiving it. They're receiving your remark about calming down as if, oh, he thinks my problem is minuscule. You know, it's not important. So rather than saying calm down, you can tweak that by suggesting I'm listening. And I'm telling you, the tone of voice is everything. There are people who will tell you that they should have gone to jail and did not go to jail because of their tone of voice. Why? Because officers are in crisis as well.
Right.
You know, when a cop leaves his home
Yeah.
and gets into an excessive use of force, in most instances, that excessive use of force wasn't intended. What happened is the unresolved anger in his life from the situation at home spilled over into his work. And so if the citizen can utilize the appropriate tone of voice and assume that, hey, this officer who's pulling me over right now, he's probably in crisis, let me do what I can to minimize the crisis in his life. And it's very simple. That's why I suggest, hey, officer, thank you for your service to the city of Atlanta. Because you know what? No one is saying that to them.
Right.
And no matter what has been happening that day, you're going to cause them pause because you showed them just a minuscule amount of civility.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. You guys talk to me about what you guys are doing, working with trying to get the release of Mr. Larry Hoover.
Well, so Larry Hoover, again, he's been there for a long time. Unfortunately, the justice system want to keep him in, like maybe red flag or something when he's scared of someone like that. They did the same thing to Michael Harris, red flagged him. But if you look at Mike now, you know, what was on Daily Mail with him, look at him now, like he's doing a great job. Ain't nobody got time to be, you know, we old school people, like you say, ain't nobody got time to be no disciple, anything like that. And then when they said, well, he announced it in July, I'm like, yeah, the papers, you know, these federal agents or anybody, they'll say, hey, put this, that, you know, he did it and he said it, and they look at it, oh, well, he announced that he was a disciple. And Larry Hoover, he's trying to help people. He's trying to utilize his work, right? To acknowledge the fact that,
Yes,
yeah, this gang, I'm gonna do what I got to do to help the community and all these other things. But you know, to answer your initial question, are we getting him out? Because you know, Larry Hoover been there too long, and not just that. I mean, it's a lot of things that's going on with his case that we know we can get him out. You know, no one like John stated before, no one has a powerhouse team like we have.
okay.
And have to get Larry Hoover out. You know, everybody did concerts, they did all these things. But however, now we come in and banging on the doors and ringing the doorbells. They see us coming. All we gotta do is just a show. They find out what's going on, and you don't just have, you know, people that's prosecutor attorneys and this and that. We have the United States. You see, so rather they used to be or are now,
Mm-hmm.
like John himself, bro, people gonna listen to that. And all we do is, like John stated, we pitching the awareness of what happened to him and why he should be let free. So 9 or 10 times Larry Hoover is gonna go. Like, okay, just let him out. Now let's do somebody else like that. But let this man go. I mean, they got him in high security, got him in maximum security, where he can't talk to anybody, he can't initiate contact. But however, Larry wrote to the judge and all them. They like, nope, we ain't letting you out, because that's how they got it. They'll send the word like, up, don't let him out. Up, don't let him out of max. But Larry is he's a calm person. Now you might have some other people that do their thing or whatever it may be, but maybe if they want the violence to stop, if they want the shooting to stop and all these things, release Larry. Larry, he was a leader before, so Larry can be a leader again, but for a good cause. He can go and talk to these guys and say, hey man, stop this, man. And they'll do it because he's a leader. He's not going there and say, I'm do this. I mean, everybody getting tired of this stuff, man. Black on black crime. They want to keep it going. You see, and so that's why they put him in the max. He can't talk. So now they say, oh, they doing Larry wrong. Let's keep doing what we do. If they was to let Larry out just to speak, just one time, watch and see what happens. But they don't want that. They want to continue to put people in jail, continue to have black on black crime, continue to point fingers and say he did it. Just because he was a leader before don't mean he did it. Just because in federal, if you tell one person, hey, he did it, they're gonna say, oh, you did it because you was a leader. And they said, well, he was in prison and he was getting all these people murdered. I mean, they say all these things, but again, like I said, Larry should be free, and we're gonna push a lot to get Larry out. And I'm not gonna say we gonna try. We are gonna get him out. We gonna get him.
Gotcha.
Same thing with David Gould. John worked in his case for a while, and it's not the state to say, okay, so y'all trying. Nah, we gonna do it, and I'm gonna continue. I'm gonna continue to push. I don't care if my head fall off, whatever. We're gonna continue to push these buttons. We're gonna continue to make these interviews, whatever, until they see us coming. But when we do come, maybe they may let them out max security or talk or something like that. But once they hit the TV, oh, it's a done deal. Now you got all these black individuals that love Larry upset about what they did to him and know the truth. So,
if I could add to what Paul said, with respect to Mr. Hoover, and can't go into great detail because obviously we can't discuss defense.
No, I wouldn't ask
with
that.
his team, but Mr. Hoover's case is actually bigger than Mr. Hoover himself. His case is representative of a systemic pattern that has existed for many, many years, and part of that pattern oftentimes starts with poor representation at the state level. There are appellate issues where oftentimes the defendant at that point, if it becomes a prisoner, the defendant can't afford competent counsel. I am not a fan of public defenders, and that's going to be a whole class in itself. I'm a big supporter of the Sixth Amendment, the right to counsel, but I'm a big supporter of the Sixth Amendment right to competent counsel. And oftentimes I'll tell people, don't be dismayed if you lose at the state trial level, because in small towns, it's not uncommon for there be a weirdly incestuous relationship between the public defender's office, the prosecutors, and the judge, and the law enforcement community. And so oftentimes we'll find that people find relief during the appeal. Now, the appeal process is problematic because there's what is known as the writ of habeas corpus, which means you've been tried and convicted and you're going to jail. And you want to go before a judge and say, Judge, I need you to review all of this. I was poorly represented. The cops withheld exculpatory information. The prosecutor overcharged me. The prosecutor, that a prosecutor can actually break the law through his opening remarks to the jury. There's a way that the prosecutor is supposed to even present himself to the jury, and the prosecutors know that people don't know that. And if the defense attorney doesn't know that, the defense attorney is not even raising the appropriate objection. We're working a case now out of Pennsylvania where I was actually conducted 2 interviews with the prisoner's attorney. And the prisoner's attorney was telling me that based on something outrageous, he moved for a mistrial and that was denied. And then he later found out during the appeal process that the trial judge and the appellate judge had a long-standing issue with him personally going back 30 years. And so their personal beef was impactful in the way that his client was denied due process. So we are not actually individually defending anyone per se. What we're doing is we're simply raising questions. We're
Right.
examining issues for the benefit of the public in an effort to develop this monolithic amount of support on the part of governors and legislatures and celebrities and mom and pop, business owners,
Sure.
where they want to get involved to back these people. That's true grassroots. Grassroots is not really what it should be. It's just a nice political term. But true grassroots means when you've got support from every representative of the society that you live in. So I was asking this attorney, I say, hey, sir, all things considered,
Mhm.
how could we, aside from examining the merits of your client's case, how could we work with you to impact a future generation? Clients that you don't even have yet who are likely to commit a crime, right? Or at least be accused of committing a
Right.
crime,
Right.
right? So he said, well, listen, we need to contact the legislatures and have them legislate more money for appellate relief, so that these prisoners or these defendants can actually retain their attorney through the appeals process. I actually contacted Governor Wolf's office and
Okay.
asked Governor Wolf to get online with me for an interview regarding this, and he's not dodging us. I contacted him during the midterm elections, and politicians have a busy schedule, but they've declined for the moment to be interviewed. That's fine, but everyone's going to know that we made them the offer to come talk to us, and they didn't prioritize it. I'll tell you, once the show gets going, we're going to have to turn away the number of governors that'll be calling us. You know why? I think the governors will want to use our platform in an effort to move their own legislatures in favor of criminal justice reform. See, reform means to change,
Right.
right? Well, the problem is that owing to politics, I don't think we're changing enough. I don't think we're changing the little known components that really impact you far more than your interaction with a cop or going before a judge. For example, again, federal prosecutor Sidney Powell, she did an amazing job of demonstrating in one of her books
Okay.
that on any given day, okay, sir, today you in Atlanta, today you committed at least 20 federal crimes. There are so many laws on the books
Uh-huh.
that, but just by living your day-to-day life, you were somehow committing a crime. And what we're going to do also is we're going to kind of put a muzzle on the FBI in terms of teaching people how to interact with the FBI. So the FBI is not what it should have been. The FBI has become highly politicized, and they're going after people and falsely accusing them. And the way that they accuse you is when you consent to give them an interview. So what they like to do, and this is a tactic, and I'm going to give you a 2-minute lesson right now. They come
I'm
knocking at
listening.
your door, Mr. Smith. I'm Agent Jones. This is Agent Tommy. We're from the Atlanta field office. Do you mind if we speak with you for a few minutes? Now, you, Mr. Smith, you're a law-abiding citizen. And
Right.
what law-abiding citizen doesn't want to cooperate with a law enforcement agent and the FBI? So you invite them into your home. One agent is talking to you, and the other agent is taking copious notes. That
Right.
night, they go back and they write up the FBI report. It's called a 302. Okay. Now, you did not participate in the writing of that report, so you have no impact on that agent's remembrance of what happened. Okay.
Okay.
So now 6 months go by, and they knock on your door again. Mr. Smith, good to see you. I hope you enjoyed your Thanksgiving turkey. Do you mind if we conduct a follow-up interview? Now, if you say anything in the follow-up interview that at all strays from what you said 6 months earlier, they will charge you with making a false statement to a federal agent. That is 18 US Code 1001. That's called the false statement clause, right? You did nothing, and that's how they muscle people to testify against others or to become informants. I mean, once they get involved in your life, it's messy. So how do you preclude that from ever happening? Okay. Knock, 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 Mr. Smith. We are from the Atlanta field office of the FBI. May we talk with you? Yes, you certainly can. But agents, do me a favor. Let me have your cards, and I'll have my attorney contact you, and we'll set you up for an audio and video recorded interview with me in the presence of my attorney. Well, sir, you don't need your attorney. You're not being charged or anything, and our policy doesn't allow interviews to be audio videotaped. Yes, sir, but I don't work for the FBI. I work for myself. And so I audio videotape all my interviews. They'll give you their cards and you'll never hear from them again. They're done. They're gone. Okay. And what do you do when you get an FBI agent who's being rude or condescending to you? Their Bible as well is the Federal Bureau of Investigation policy guideline regarding conducts and ethics. It's their 800-page Bible. So you can say, oh, agent, I appreciate your service to the city of Atlanta, but I'm sure you appreciate that your conduct with me, this condescension, is in violation of the FBI's manual regarding policy and ethics. And you could be subjected to an investigation by your own OPR, which is OPR is Office of Professional Responsibility. It's our own internal affairs unit. See, Otis, everybody can be leveraged. It's just a little bit of knowledge, and it doesn't require advanced education. All we're going to do is we're going to point people in the right direction, give them some resources.
I love it. I love it because once again, you're teaching us how to fight, not just to fight, but how to fight. Like you said, you're giving us the knowledge, but also the wisdom for the mature application of the knowledge. Because you can have the knowledge, but if you don't apply it correctly, then you're still back at square one. So
yeah, I appreciate your openness to that. Thank you.
Oh yes, oh yes. Let me ask you this: how important is it to think before you react? Because once again, no, I'm just giving you the premises why I'm asking the question. Because a lot of times, like you said, we tend to oh, they can't do this or they can't do that, or instead of walking away from a situation, you either our people are either running into it or trying to defend themselves. I'm standing my ground, and I always tell people it's not self-defense if you shoot across the street. That's not self. That's a shootout. That's not a. That's not a. You you didn't have to shoot across the street. So how is it important for our people to start realizing you got to think before you react? Because my motto has been for years is you don't know the law until you're in trouble.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I really appreciate the framing of that question because it's really something that we address in our crisis management class. And the first thing I encourage people to do is to move away from the quote react and operate from the position of response. So we don't react, we respond. See, most people react viscerally from an emotional perspective, either born of their prior negative experiences or inherent anger or personality issues. In many cases, they respond based on the injurious experiences of other people. Okay? And so when you react, you're more than likely going to react in a way that's not going to benefit you. Number one, you take a deep breath. Number two, you live in the freest country on the face of the earth, right? Everywhere you are, you can say anything you want to say, you can do anything you want to do. You simply take a moment. You don't have to respond because law enforcement is trained to speak to you in a certain cadence to well up anxiety in you. That's why they speak to you so quickly, because it's like playing blackjack, where you got to be a good count carder. You know what I mean? Well, they speak to you in a way that's designed to well up your anxiety. And when people have their anxiety welled up, they lose the ability because you're parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous system kicks in. And that becomes the fight or flight. And there's no such thing as fight or flight. People neither fight nor flee. They become paralyzed. And so when you become paralyzed and you don't know how to respond, you're going to react. So we move away from reaction and you simply respond. And I don't know if I actually answered your question, but it takes practice to focus on the response rather than the reaction. So for example, if you find that the officer is asking you a bunch of confusing questions and you don't know how to respond, there's nothing from saying, officer, I appreciate your service to the city of Atlanta. All things considered, you're speaking so quickly and you're using language I don't quite understand. Can you slow it down and ask me your question another way so I can give you an honest answer? You take control. Right now, the imbalance is in favor of the law enforcement community, where they're controlling 99% of the narrative. No, it's got to be 50-50. And so people, as I said earlier, people should not position themselves to let the law enforcement community decide how good or bad that contact's going to be. we have to be proactive and we have to be participating. And the problem is that most people, when they're participating in the exercise of their own rights, they give into the emotions and the fear, and they curse and they challenge. And, it just, like I said, I'm just not a fan at all of those many First Amendment auditors on YouTube. They are poor role models for our youth.
My final question for you, and I know you're going to quote unquote set us free on this one. And you probably didn't even think I was going to ask you this question.
Oh, we're open to every question.
Talk to me about the Fifth and the 14th Amendment.
Okay, the Fifth and the 14th Amendment, those are our due process amendments. So when you read the Fifth Amendment, you have the right to not say anything. In the actual language of the Fifth Amendment is the right not to be engaged in compelled confession. You have the right to confess, but it cannot be compelled. And people sometimes think of the word compelled as a result of a physical beating, which may have existed years ago.
Right.
But sometimes you may feel compelled to confess to something you did, because of a psychological, an amount of psychological pressure that leads you to feel compelled to have to cooperate. There are people who confess to crimes they didn't commit all the time. So who's likely to do that? People whose IQ is under 80 and they don't understand what's going on. People who are youth and they want to gain the adoration of the detective. People who are simply fearful and they want to bring this to an end because they don't understand where they are in the criminal justice or where they are on the criminal justice conveyor belt. So the Fifth Amendment is your due process. Due process means that rules have to be followed. Now, until the passage of the 14th Amendment, what they call the Equal Protection Clause, the first 10 amendments, 1 to 10, including the Fifth Amendment right to not say anything and exercise, respect due process, was only applicable in certain types of cases, mostly federal cases. Okay. With the passage of the 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause in the 14th Amendment made the Constitution or the Bill of Rights applicable to everyone, regardless of state or federal crimes. Okay. So they blanket each other, they support each other. So if you're suing an officer for false arrest, false imprisonment, under what they call 42 U.S. 1983. That's the 42 United States Code 1983, which allows a citizen like yourself to sue an Atlanta police officer or the Atlanta Police Department. Under the parameters of 1983, you'd be suing them on the grounds that they violated your Fourth Amendment, your Fifth Amendment right to due process, and your 14th Amendment right to due process.
So I'm glad you, because like I said, knowledge and wisdom is key. And you used this word earlier, to speak the language. And a lot of times, like you said, any citizen, I don't want to just say black people, but any citizen is at a disadvantage because they don't know the language. You don't know the language. So you've already lost because they're saying they stay within their lingo and you don't understand you don't speak the language, and then you don't understand the language. So you're lost, and you get into situations like you said that you get taken advantage of. You sign over your rights because I always tell people it's amazing. Like when you get in trouble, they just start throwing years at you. Like look, man, you're looking at about 25, 30 years, but if you fight it, we can take it to court. If you fight it, if you win, of course you win. But if you lose, you're looking at 25 to 30. Now, we can do this plea deal.
Yes, and you could do. That's horrible. That's absolutely horrible. Yeah,
you could do 5 to 10. And now, like you said, you have a federal or state charge. Just depending on what you're charged with, right? You have either one on your record because. To your point, what you said is that part is you're being coerced to sign a confession because they've scared you into fighting for knowing that you're innocent. So you take this plea deal and you're in jail and you never committed a crime.
So one of the things that I hope, or we as a team hope to accomplish with local politicians, is to have them work with their state legislatures to approve what they call a true charging bill. A true charging bill means that based on the circumstances in the case, with respect to the crime committed, that when a prosecutor works with your attorney to let you know what your sentence could be, it should be representative of the reality of what it actually could be, 3 to 5. not this broad range of 3 to 25, because most people are going to focus on the end part of that, the 25. And the prosecutors know that. But if they have to now operate under what is known as true bill standards, they can't do that. And I tell this to people, guys, if you didn't do it, you never take a plea. You take your chance and you go to trial, okay? Because at least with trial, you'll have an avenue of address with the appellate system. And I've never worked for the Innocence Project. I know of them, and I know that they've done outstanding work over the years. But we're different from the Innocence Project in that we're trying to address a series of patterns on a sweeping basis to impact as many people as possible, rather than relegating ourselves to a single case over a period of 5 to 10 years, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I'm sorry about that. I had another phone call.
I got you. You
I
good?
got something in 5 to 10 minutes.
Listen,
I'm like, okay,
I told you interruptions get interrupted. That's
yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's all right. It's all right, man. I keep my show authentic.
Okay.
I appreciate you guys and what you guys are doing in the community. How can people find you guys, especially when someone sees this and say, hey, I got a cousin, my father, my mother, or me, the individual self. How can they reach out to you guys? How can we also see the docuseries?
Okay, so we probably won't be filming a docu-series. It ain't a doc. It's a TV show about
Yeah.
case by case.
Okay.
We put it on a lot of outlets. We didn't talk to some people from A&E, things like that nature, but we can't go really deep into where it's going to be at. But people understand if they go to our website at secondchancesaveslives.org. That's a number 2.
Okay.
D as in dog, Chance, CHANCE, saves, SAVES, lives, LIVES.org. And they go to the left and hit the thing that says, and it tells you forgotten prisoners. They get hit on forgotten prisoners, and they can see, when it's going to come out, and they also can submit a case to us for the second season. If they know somebody who's been wrongly accused, any family members, they've overserved their time, and things like that in that nature. Or, all the website, they got our social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, things like that in nature.
Okay.
And then, Otis, in the few minutes we have left, can I share with you a little bit about one of our cases, David Do, a case I've been working
Sure.
since 2017?
Yes,
Time to
please
discuss
do.
that? Because his case also is representative of a pattern that we want to address. So November 2017, I'm at home in California, and I get a call, and it's a blocked call. So I pick up, and it's a young lady saying, hey, John, I have a new client for you. And before I can say, hold on, let me find out what's going on here, she connected with David too. David was calling me from the Correctional Institute, where he's been a prisoner for 40 years for a crime he didn't commit. And I'll go into detail. He called me, and obviously I didn't know who he was. I was a little angry with the young lady for not positioning me to know in advance what was going on. Because, if you're a former federal agent, you get a call from a prison, you figure it's one of your cases trying to threaten you or your family, whatever. So David spoke to me, and I said, well, sir, let's do this. I'm going to give you 5 minutes for my safety and yours, quite honestly. In those 5 minutes, tell me some things I need to know to validate you in your case before I decide to get involved with you. So he said, well, I've been represented for many years by former California Supreme Court Justice Cruz Reynoso. At one point, former California Senator Alan Cranston was representing me as well. So I said, okay, thank you, and I hung up. 5 days later, I was on the phone with California, former Supreme Court Justice Cruz Reynoso. He was teaching law in upstate California. He had taken on David's case way back in the early 90s. And then he brought in his friend, then Senator Alan Cranston. And they were both friends of Governor Jerry Brown. And Jerry Brown had been governor of California twice. It was actually Governor Brown who appointed Cruz Reynoso to the California Supreme Court. So what we have is this. 1983, David is a driver in a vehicle. And David was not an angel. He acknowledges that, okay? David was a driver in a vehicle where his 2 friends said, hey, we got to go talk to a guy real quick. And David didn't know that those 2 gentlemen were going to end up committing a homicide. So David was sentenced for felony murder, an indeterminate sentence. Shortly after the sentencing, one of the defendants exonerated David and said, no, David wasn't involved. We were the ones. Well, David was represented by a public defender at the time, who over the next 40 years would go on to be one of the most preeminent criminal defense attorneys in America. Well,
Wow.
David's attorney struck a deal with the public defender's office, and David had wanted to go to trial and didn't go to trial. And then when David tried to seek a writ of habeas corpus before a judge for an appeal, that had expired. And so when David was now being represented 10 years later in the 90s by a former Supreme Court justice, it drew a lot of attention to his case. It also drew the ire of the low-level correction officers. Over the course of 40 years, the low-level correction officers would promote throughout the system and now become administrators for the state of California. And they would say to him for years, "You are never getting out of here." And then there were issues with the parole board. During that time, David was a stellar, well, he is a stellar prisoner. He's written songs. He's put together a protocol regarding active shooter training for kids. He saved the life of a corrections officer. And he's been someone who's been an asset to society, although he's never seen society for the last 40 years.
Wow.
So Cruz Reynoso's health was ailing. And in 2019, shortly before he passed away, he asked me to stay on with the case after he'd gone to be with the Lord. So when Judge Reynoso passed away, I stayed on. And so knowing that Governor Brown had appointed Cruz Reynoso, Honorable Reynoso told me that 10 years ago, he sent a package to the governor's office seeking the governor's review and intercession in this case. Well, that package got intercepted somewhere in the governor's office and it never made it to the governor. So in 2019, I wrote an email to the governor and I copied a ton of people. We're actually going to highlight that communication on the show, asking the governor to get involved, if only for the benefit of his ailing friend, Judge Reynoso, before the judge would die.
Right.
Well, that didn't happen, but Governor Brown did pass what is known as 1437. And 1437 was a condition where now people who were convicted of felony murder could be resentenced because they were no longer holding that felony murder against that person. Well, prisoners all around California found relief and release under 1437. We cannot get the district attorney in San Diego County to resentence David under those conditions. They just refuse to even consider resentencing him. And so with that, we're working with David to bring that condition to light in an effort to well up just a tremendous amount of social pressure to move upon the district attorney in San Diego County to do the right thing. Because the district attorney has evidence that David was exonerated by one of the co-defendants. I actually possess that. I possess that letter.
Wow.
You know, the judge kept all that information. The problem that we're facing now is that going back to 1983, many of the transcripts are not available. And so we're digging. We're digging. And so David's case is what a doctor would call a diagnostic challenge, but we're going to make it happen. We're going to make it happen. You know, I'll tell you, any holiday that's celebrated, whether it be Christmas or Easter, you know, recently Thanksgiving, I get depressed knowing that this man has not seen a holiday in the last 40-something years for a crime he didn't commit. That's the thing. So that's where we want to really address the issue of criminal justice reform, because he was overcharged, and the issue of felony murder in many states is a compelling one where people are going to be doing life sentences. Listen, we're not excusing the behavior. Maybe they shouldn't have been there. Maybe they shouldn't have been in the gang. But you also shouldn't have to give up your entire life because you were taught how to make poor choices in your youth. You know, there should be greater parity, greater fairness when it comes to sentencing.
Well,
So
in his case, though, but if you don't know, why are you charging me for something I didn't know? Like, in other words, you know how people say, even with athletes, like, well, they shouldn't put themselves in that situation. How do you know you're putting themselves? How do they know they're putting themselves in that situation? You look at the people that were shot and killed in the grocery store in Buffalo, the children shot and killed, the mass shooting in Texas, people going to church in South Carolina and getting murdered. How are they supposed to know that wrong place, wrong time? I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's why I always tell people, it's not, but if not for the grace of God, because I don't know when I'm going to Publix or Kroger's or whatever the grocery store is, if I'm going to a concert, or watch this, even if I'm just staying at home, how do I know this is not the day some fool wants to choose to break in my house? All the houses today, he want to come in my house, right? So
Yeah.
we don't know. And so like in his case, I pray that the work that you and Paul are doing to help get people free for one like you said, overcharged crimes or crimes that the people have not even committed. Because like you said, sometimes where the worst enemy is time, it's not because they're
Mhm.
doing the time. Well, it is because they're doing the time, but it's because time marches on and people start to settle in that that's where they're going their loved one or this person or friend is going to be. So
Yeah.
people give up, and you just relegate it to being there. And
Yeah.
I've never been to prison far as someone that stayed, but I know just how nervous I've been at visiting people
Mhm.
in prison. And I used to look at the COs like, hey, because they take your driver, like they take your ID. I said, hey,
Right.
bro, hey, I'm leaving. Get me confused.
Hey,
Hey,
don't
hey,
find some
hey,
more.
hey,
Lock me up.
trust me, you ain't seen how fast I can run. I'm just trying to tell you. But just that feeling,
Right.
Mhm.
you know, I had someone that was dear to me, and I'm not gonna put him on blast, but excuse me, dear to me, that was incarcerated. And I remember, in the county that they were in before they had to do, state time, go to county, and you couldn't even touch them. You know,
Right.
when you have a loved one, somebody, you can't even give a touch, or you go visit, you're leaving, but they're staying. you know
Mhm.
and it's one of those things that as you guys both know, and Paul, what you went through, how gut wrenching
Yeah.
it can really be. And so the work that you guys are doing, man, I just tip my hat to you guys, because you stated it earlier, Paul, in the beginning, that you're going to have challenges, you're going to have oppositions. John, you mentioned where some people, they get in it, and then when the going get tough, they're gone. And that's because really, and you mentioned it earlier, John, because really it wasn't their fight. It wasn't their fight they were supposed to take up. It just seemed
Yeah.
something that was cool to do. Yeah, let me jump on, because they thought it
Mhm.
would be something that, as you guys are bringing certain things to light, that okay, this person's gonna get out, this, that, and the other. And sometimes, watch
Mhm.
this, it's I'll be known that I was a part of that. And so
Mhm.
when it's not your fight, like in other words, this is not what you're supposed to be doing, that's why you're gonna give up. So you have to stay in your lane. And so I appreciate you guys, that this is your fight to help others fight to get out. And I want to bring you guys back on the show, especially early in the new year,
Mhm.
and dig deeper in some other scenarios. And John, you giving us more and more knowledge and wisdom on how to know what to say, right? And like you said, in the tone uh to say it in, because one, two, we're seeing too many people, especially on Facebook and YouTube, and like you said, Paul and John, earlier. I know my rights. And you all amped up. Now you got the cop. Now he
Mhm.
right here ready, and
Yep.
like
Yeah.
you, like, bruh, you sometimes you just have to. I saw something the other day, and the guy was like, "No, I ain't getting out the car. Why I got to get out the car? I ain't committed no crime. You just." And I'm sitting looking at this like, "Bruh, you escalate. You not defeat. You escalate."
Mhm.
They had they had the cop that stopped him. They had his boss. I just need to know this, because by such and such law, I don't have. And when he was quoted, I'm not going to lie to you, Paul. I was listening, like, I don't think you know what you're talking about. Really, you
Right.
saying
Right.
something that I don't think you even know what you're talking about.
Mhm.
But he kept another cop. Three. What was
Mhm.
a routine traffic stop? He escalated to three cops. Now, the thing I have to give the cops credit, John, is they kept going, like, sir, please, we're trying
Right.
to, you're
They try to.
escalating. And
Yeah.
the supervisor,
Mhm.
and here's the thing, the sergeant the cop that stopped him was white, but
Mhm.
his commanding officer was black. And the
Mhm.
commanding officer said, "Look, man, look, we don't have time to be out with you all day. We you, like you gonna look. Come on, you know, because what they wanted was his name, and then we started getting to why you didn't want to give the name. Well, you didn't want to give
Yeah.
the name. Why? You didn't have a driver license. He said, "Well, I
Mhm.
don't have a license, but in the state of such and such, I don't have to have." And I'm sitting there like, "Oh, bro, that don't even sound right." Now, all state, you got to have a license. I don't like he was. But once again, John, even if he didn't have a license, the way had he it seemed from what I was looking, the cops, yeah, they'd have wrote you a ticket, but they probably would have
Mhm.
let him go on his way. And he
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
he escalated to where 3 cops was there because you don't want to give information. You're forcing them to go to a
Yeah.
place that it didn't even have to go. So that's why I appreciated what you were saying earlier, giving us the tone, knowing
Mhm.
uh not not so much the regulations of which
Mhm.
the cops operate in our particular state that we need to know that
Mhm.
you can quote that because like you said, one, it gives them pause to say, who is this? Who who
Yeah.
who is this? Because they know on an average stop, a person that is not coming at them with that. So this got
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
somebody.
Yeah.
And then, Otis.
Give you
Oh,
an
sorry. You
example.
go first, Paul.
I'm gonna give you an example of that. So you want to de-escalate the situation. You know, when I was running a juvenile home in Michigan, I tell these kids they come out mean from Detroit, Saginaw. You know, these are bad areas. You know, Ypsilanti and all this, and they want to. You know, they upset. You know, kids, and I can understand the people, individual in the car, because something might happen to their family or whatever
Mhm.
it may be. Then, but however, I think that everyone, I ain't gonna say I think, I know that everyone should just still abide by the rules of the law. However, like you said, it's a tone, you know, that people display to someone to make them upset. If that tone goes down, I'm gonna give you an example. I'm driving one day, the cop stops me, state trooper. They bigger than the police officer. They state trooper stops me. How you doing, sir? I said, I'm doing outstanding. What's going on, Mr. Officer, sir? And I smiled at him. He was still like he was upset or something. Like John said, it could have been something that he had some problems with at home.
Right.
Somebody could have died, or whatever it may be that made him kind of reject me a little bit, right?
Hmm.
So after the conversation was going, I was taking it to another level. I was taking it down. He was like, "Sir," he said, "I stopped you because this is that." He had to, like, he had another car behind me or something happened to him. Well, okay, now it's another black guy. He gonna give me some problem. I didn't give him any problems. What I did is, I just escalate what he was thinking of me as an individual. So I'm driving at a stop and I'm talking to him. And as I was talking to him, he going down, 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 down a notch. Right. And he says, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and let you go. You know, the stop sign had this and this on it. You know, they should have had to put it on this side. I don't know why. You know, and I'm laughing with him and having a great time. I took him out his element of destruction. Right. So he stated to me, "Hey, I'm gonna let you go. Next time, you know, this sign is right here. And you know what?" He said, "I'm gonna tell you something." He goes, thank you for letting me have a great day. I said, "Oh, you all right?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm okay." And, you know, it looked like he was gonna cry, and he walked out. So if you don't even know, a lot of people don't even know officers been through some things, or somebody hurt them, or you know, some happened, you know, where they can't get off. They like, okay, now they agitated, and so it might be somebody else to agitate. Like you said, they had 3 or 4 or 5 cars. That didn't make no sense. And then if you keep talking to a person and talking to a person, it's gonna upset them because they like, man, look here, you know. But if you just like, listen, officer, I'm sorry, and they come back and say, do you have a license? I don't have a license, sir, but I am very sorry for that. I had to drive because of this and this was emergency. Can you let me go? You know, just kind of like ease the situation down. Because when you start raising your vocal, oh, I know what I got to do. I got my rights and all this, and then now sparking him up and like, okay, I'm gonna call this man. I'm gonna call because that they have to call these people. Like, hey man, I'm gonna
Mhm.
call Sergeant. Come on and just escalate this situation. You know.
Yeah.
On the other hand, we can always take it down a notch, knowing what's going on. We don't know what they've been through. They don't know what we've been through. We all human beings, but
Common
at the same
courtesy.
right, you
Yeah.
still like you said, be very nice and be courteous. Say, okay, I understand what you're going through at this time. But a lot of people appreciate that. A lot of officers appreciate that. I think that if we keep doing it that way, hey, this world be a better place, you know. And then
It's so true.
you know, so
Hey, Paul, can I add to that? So you just reminded
Go
me of
ahead.
something. So about 6 months ago, I had a 2-week law class for veterans here in LA. I had a black veteran in my class, about 58, 59, outstanding. He was Air Force intelligence. And so he was telling us that where he was living in Orange County, California, for different reasons, he had come into contact with law enforcement, none of it resulting in anything negative.
Mhm.
But he didn't know that each time he came into contact with law enforcement, that officer would do a field notation card.
Right.
And so he would write down the person's name, his date of birth, description, and they put it in the what they call the mobile data terminal system, which is the computer system in the vehicles.
Right.
And so he didn't know that until after the fact, because on this particular occasion, and I'm not putting him on blast, he'll be very muted about it. On this particular occasion, he had been drinking, right? And he did have a joint in the car, and it was evident when they pulled him over. But what happened is that when checking his license and running everything, it came up in the officer's terminal how outstanding his prior engagement with law enforcement had been, because it stayed in the system. The officer said, "Hey, listen, I'm not going to use his name, Mr. So-and-so, you've been in the community a long time. I can see from the field notes that you're a very positive contributor to the community. Let's do this. Let's put your car in that Ralph's shopping lot over there, okay? And let's get you in an Uber and a cab, and let's get you home. And then tomorrow you come back and get your car." So he should have gone to jail, but he did not, because of his prior engagement with law enforcement. So every time you come and talk to law enforcement, whether you know it or not, that is an incremental contribution to the betterment of that community.
Thank you for sharing that before we get off, because people need to know that even if they just write you a ticket or don't, they are listing what your attitude was or is
Mhm.
in that moment. So sometimes that's probably for other people. That's probably why every time you get pulled over, you get a ticket. Probably because
Some people,
yeah. But see the thing, you're giving us what the average person doesn't know. So now, whether you want to fight because you felt like you was wrongfully pulled over, or whatever, like you said, you need to handle it and the wisdom and the way that you're giving us, because it's going into a database. And soon
Mhm.
as they pull you over, it could be you didn't stop all the way, just but
Yeah,
soon as
yeah.
you give them that driver license, when they walk back to that car, they
Mhm.
come back, and now they're going to give you a ticket, or they're talking to you a certain way because they're expecting a certain engagement from you based on prior history that you didn't even know was
Mhm.
put in the system. So I,
Yeah.
I appreciate those words of wisdom and that you guys both gave us tonight. I
Well,
think
let's leave you with this. So there in
sure,
Atlanta, what you can do
sure.
in Atlanta, you can Google the I don't know your vehicle code there, but in
Mhm.
California, I give my students a list of the 25 most common vehicle code infractions. So the 25 most common reasons why an officer will pull you over. And so if you just make sure you don't engage in those 25, you're good. But honestly, you can do the same thing there in Atlanta. You can find out the source of what constitutes the greatest number of reasons why there are traffic
Okay,
stops, and then
okay,
you just work to secure yourself against that in advance.
okay. Well, thank you for blessing us with your presence. We don't take it lightly. I'll be reaching out to you guys again for next year to bring us
Thank
on
you.
so we can get educated more and more. Continue much success. I want you guys to stay safe and stay blessed. And we'll be seeing you again.
Yeah, we appreciate
Thank you. God bless you.
Peace.